What's good, friends? List episode 98 of the Game Pass Gamecast coming at you. The Coalition has been the driving force behind the Gears of War franchise since the studio's inception in 2010, and with the recent success of Gears 5, fans are eager to know what's next for the Vancouver studio. And from what it sounds like, it may not just be Gears of War we'll be seeing from them. So, this week, we dive into the new reports that the Coalition has multiple projects in the works, utilizing Unreal Engine 5, in addition to Gears 6, and just what those projects could look like. Will we see new spin-off titles akin to that of Splash Damage's Gears Tactics? What about the rumors regarding a Star Wars project in the pipeline from them? We dig deep to see just what the team could have down the road for us. Also, we've got our spoiler-free Resident Evil Village reviews on deck. Ubisoft seems to be altering their business model to make room for more free-to-play experiences and much, much more. Coming up on the newest jam-packed episode of the Game Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, the whole rigmarole I tell you every week, wherever you get a podcast at. And if we're not on the podcast platform you use, let me know. I'll try my best to get it on there. The more the merrier, you know? And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travless on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Mike P-Pack. Mike, what's up? What's going on, and what have you been playing? I had to throw in the what's up because a little inside baseball, like literally for the past 5 minutes before we've been trying to start the show, we just for some reason kept going, what's up? Like fucking Scary Movie
1999.
Yeah. But outside of that, Mike, what's good? What's going on? And what have you been playing?
Yeah, for me, not a whole lot has been going on. Just kind of chilling, doing my thing. But game I've been playing the most. I mean, I've been playing Halo, still playing some of that normal mix that I've been playing a lot of. But I have been playing a lot of Resident Evil on stream. So I'm probably like 3/4 of the way through that game, I would say, maybe a little bit further than 3/4 of the game. So I am, genuinely really enjoying it, having a ton of fun with it. And thus far, super impressed with it. I think we're going to talk about it later. But yeah, that's the game I've been playing the most. That's like kind of out of the norm, if you will.
Yeah, I was gonna say hold that thought because we are gonna get into that a little bit later with our spoiler-free review of it. I mean, we're obviously planning on doing a spoiler cast with it. I think it just didn't necessarily work this week. I finished the game. I actually just finished it tonight because I was playing it with my fiance and, being the good partner I am, waiting for her to play, because if not, I probably would have binged it in a day or two, because that's usually how I play Resident Evils, if I play them by myself, just because they're so easy to kind of sit there and binge through. But yeah, it didn't necessarily work out that we were able to do a spoiler cast this week, plus 2 at the same time. I'm one of those people, I know there's a mindset of, some content creators, which is totally fine, and I completely see that end of it. I personally am the other way, but of, hey, we're going to put a spoiler cast, or we're going to put a spoiler-filled review out, the day the game launches, and it's there to, hey, when you finish the game, come back to it. This is what that's here for. We don't want you listening to it now. Me, personally, I don't really like that because that puts spoilers out in the ether to people, and it is easy for people to still stumble upon that stuff. But to each their own. So it kind of works out in the best way, and potentially we can get Marshy on the show too. He's playing it right now. I know he's playing a ton of different things right now, but I know that's one of the games in his loop, and the game isn't necessarily that long, so hopefully maybe we can get him on there and we could all talk about spoiler-filled Resident Evil. But in a little bit, we'll talk about Resident Evil in general, Resident Evil Village, on what we think from a spoiler-free standpoint. But besides that, on my end, kind of the same deal. I also, outside of obviously Resident Evil, I've been playing a few different things, trying to get kind of back into, after kind of going on a little bit of a binge fest with movies, where I was, still playing games, obviously, but playing only a small stable of games, like Overwatch and Halo when we play and things like that, where I wasn't deviating into different things outside of just, a lot of like competitive esports titles or, whatnot. But I've been getting back into playing now, just a carousel of different games. I rolled credits recently on Katana Zero, a game that has been in my backlog and my radar for a long time and just never sat down to play it. Extremely highly recommended. Absolutely love that game. If you're into really, if you're a fan of Cuphead, other 2D, not bullet hell, I wouldn't call it. It can be a little bullet hell sometimes, but very, 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 almost you can even think elements of Mega Man in there too, with time manipulation, everything. It's incredible. It's a really good game. The story's great. But yeah, I definitely recommend that. It's on Game Pass too, on PC. I think it's on console as well, but for sure on Game Pass on PC. But you can pick it up on Steam, Xbox, whatever. It's there. But yeah, if you had Game Pass, go ahead and check it out. Really, really, really stellar game. Outside of that, Molly and I were kind of working through It Takes Two until obviously Resident Evil came out. So we'll probably finish that up this weekend. We don't have much more left on that, which I was hoping to finish that beforehand, but obviously being a co-op game and trying to be the good partner I am, I wait to play these games I really get hooked on. But yeah, outside of that, it's really been, I've been trying to, like I said, work in more games, single player experiences now after kind of taking a little break and doing more, different things playing more esports titles and things like that, getting back into playing different games like that. But I'm now starting to kind of dive back into my backlog, my never ending backlog, now that I have Resident Evil out of the way and whatnot. So a couple games I'm just trying to even think off the top of my head that I want to tackle. I do want to get back into Monster Hunter World. That's kind of been on my list to do so. I finally want to wrap up the Blood and Wine expansion on The Witcher. That's on there, though. That will probably be a little bit more of a commitment. I'm trying to knock out shorter games, a lot of the indie titles that I've been wanting to play for a long time, that kind of been sitting in my backlog and different things like that. I kind of want to get through and maybe, knock a few of them out in a week's time or whatever. But yeah, totally overwhelmed with my backlog still. And so I'd like to kind of start chipping away at that now that kind of in the slower part of our downtime for work and whatnot. So that lends cadence to that to be able to do that. So, but yeah, totally playing a bunch of different things. But Resident Evil obviously has been the big game that I've been playing that, I'm excited to talk about. But before we do so, Mike, let's head into Button Mash. Get that out of the way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but let's get it out of the way so we can talk about Resident Evil, because I'm ready to talk about Resident Evil. So let's kick it off with Button Mash. If you're new to the show, Button Mash is where we run through our quick hit news stories to get you caught up for the week before we head into our big topics. So, kicking off Button Mash, starting with Skull and Bones has been pushed back yet again. Yes, the pirate simulator that whenever Sea of Thieves was kind of announced, and this was announced, and 3 other pirate simulator games were announced. People were like, what the fuck is with all the pirate simulators? But yeah, Skull and Bones, the one from Ubisoft, has been pushed back again. Ubisoft's confirmed that the ship sim is now targeting a release date somewhere between 2022 and 2023. And I think this game was announced in 2016, something like that. So it's been a while. The latest Skull and Bones delay was confirmed in Ubisoft's full year earnings report for 2020, which we will be talking about here soon, because there's some interesting things and big topics about Ubisoft. So Ubisoft boasted its robust product lineup for 2021, including Far Cry 6, Rainbow Six Quarantine, Riders Republic, The Division Heartland, and Roller Champions, but also snuck in the new Skull and Bones delay in its report. EA Play Live, the developer summer showcase, will return this year on July 22nd. While EA hasn't formally announced plans for the show, it feels to be like an all-digital event in the vein of E3 2021 and Gamescom 2021. Lucasfilm Games. Ton of games that from my childhood that come from Lucasfilm Games, and I'm glad that it has been brought back. We talked about that on an earlier episode earlier this year, or even last year. I can't remember when that. No, it was this year. Yeah, it was this year whenever they announced the Indiana Jones game and whatnot. Yeah. So go back, listen to that episode. I gotta gush about Lucasfilm Games, but they're resurrecting Zombies Ate My Neighbors and the sequel Ghoul Patrol for PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Switch. Obviously, we're focusing on the Xbox One and PC versions. They'll arrive on June 29th. 16-bit games released by LucasArts in 1993 and 95, respectively, have been made playable on modern consoles and given a few new features along the way. The re-releases have been worked on by retro specialist Dotemu, which made Streets of Rage 4, and will be sold together for $14.99 USD, obviously, if you're listening to this and you're in the States. If not, look it up, because I don't know conversions that well, because I'm an idiot. Since its launch on May 7th, Resident Evil Village, obviously the game we're excited to talk more about, has shipped over 3 million units globally, which is pretty big. Capcom announced the news in a press release revealing that this newest entry, available on Xbox Series X and PC and Xbox One 2, is off to a strong start. Beast Boy from DC's Teen Titans is now available in Fortnite. He'll be able to join his comic teammate Raven, and there will be even a chance to earn some specific Beast Boy and Raven rewards with the animal shapeshifter lands on the island. He'll come with the request back bling, a controller shaped like a pizza box, and custom pickaxe. Furthermore, Beast Boy will come with both his superhero outfit and casual outfit, plus his Go Ape emote will let him transform into a green gorilla that he's known for. If you're like me and a big comic nerd, that's pretty dope. A disgruntled movie director has suggested that Capcom copied his monster design for a boss fight in Resident Evil Village, which I will not go into details on the boss fight, but you can definitely go, and I'll throw the link in the description to the story. If you have gone through Resident Evil Village, you'll be able to know which one it is, but it is pretty strikingly similar, I'll give him that. The claim has come from Dutch director Richard Raphorst via LinkedIn, who states that the design of the boss monster from Resident Evil Village is the same as a creature from his 2013 horror movie Frankenstein's Army. He reads, quote, "In 2013, I directed my film Frankenstein's Army. It's a crazy monster-filled film with my own creature designs, one of which has been used completely without authorization or credit in the newest Resident Evil game," end quote. The Witcher 3's Xbox Series X and S next-gen upgrade may be implementing fan-made mods like the Witcher 3 HD Reworked project when it launches later this year. As reported by Kotaku, the Witcher 3 HD Reworked project's creator Hal Kogan announced that he has been in talks with CD Projekt Red about including his mod in the upcoming release. Quote, "Hello, dear friends. It's been a long time since my last video," Hogan wrote. "I know I announced a new HD RP preview in early March, but I was silent the whole time." What?
I hate to interrupt you. I know you're on a roll. This motherfucker's name is Hal Kogan.
I know, right?
Hal Kogan.
Trust me, when I was putting together the doc, I laughed and got all my laughter out now, so I can kind of like read through it, because if not, I would have fucking got, you know me with reading this stuff, I would have got hung up with it like that. Plus, all the listeners know this guy can't fucking talk and read at the same time. They see Hal Kogan, they know, like, man, Travis had to have looked at that shit for like fucking 3 hours to make sure he didn't mess that up. But then goddamn Mike ends up messing me up.
I'm sorry.
I know. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But yes, Hal Kogan. Yeah. Anyways, quote, "I know I announced a new HDRP preview in early March, but I was silent the whole time. Sorry for that. But in return, I have some good news and the reasons why I was quiet and why I don't have too much to show. I think the important news is that I got an official message from CDPR about cooperation. While it's not certain yet, it's very likely that HDRP will be included in the official next generation update. I will inform you what's next. As always, I would like to thank you for all your support and kind words." So, after all that, Mike, anything in button mash you want to run back before we dig into our big topics for the week?
Congratulations to Capcom, Resident Evil, 3 million units, pretty big.
Hell yeah.
Game is really stellar. We'll talk about it later. Lucasfilm's coming back, kind of cool. That those games, some of those old historical games are coming back. And big shout out to my boy Hal Kogan, my brother from another mother, if you will. I just had to get another Hal Kogan shout out in there because what a fucking name.
Oh, I know. Absolutely.
And his parents had to know. Like, you don't name your kid
No.
Hulk Hogan and not know.
I feel very safe saying that's gotta be like
A nickname, you
like
think?
a screen name or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking it up right now. I'm really curious. Let me see. Hulk Hogan. I mean, it's got to be just like an online persona.
Right, I would think so. I would imagine.
Like, I'm digging around trying to find it, but I would hope so. I can't imagine. I mean, but there's also people who name their kid like Dick Buttkiss or something like that. I swear to God, like actual name. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, Hulk Hogan, I'm going to name my kid that. Like, hey, more power to his parents, I guess. Anyways, though, so that's it. Nothing else you want to run back?
Oh no, that's. I think that's it.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just want to make sure before, because I'm ready to go into Resident Evil and talk about Resident Evil.
I'm ready to go back to Hulk Hogan.
But... Okay. So, Mike, let's head into our big topics for the week. And obviously, the one big topic before we get into our news and stuff like that we'll obviously go through. Let's talk about Resident Evil Village. I think we can, dive into it. You're definitely, obviously, just kind of to set the scene. I have finished the game. I've rolled credits on it. I played on just normal mode, just to get the story and everything like that. I fully plan on going back through and playing a Madhouse level difficulty, or it's called, I think, Village of Shadows difficulty or something like that. You have to go through and play the game anyways to beat the game once already to go through and get that as it is. But Mike, you're almost done with the game. You said about 3/4 of the way through. I know you've been playing it on stream too, and you want to kind of keep with that. But
I kind of want to finish it. I kind of want to finish it up on stream, but I just finished carrying Madame Moreau up the mountain. But
yeah,
or I just finished Mr. Moreau, but I don't want to spoil too much for anyone that hasn't really played. But yeah, so. Madame Zeroni just got carried up the mountain.
Now you must get a Madame Zeroni up the mountain. Jesus Christ. Anyways, though, yes, so I feel pretty good about probably doing a spoiler cast next week of some sort, even if it is just a, half of the show or whatever dedicated to that. But yes, so I guess I'll kind of kick off the conversation about it. Just kind of, like I said, I wanted to just at least give our top level thoughts on it.
Sure.
Just kind of, obviously not spoiler filled or anything like that. Just kind of what we thought about the game in general. And I know I kind of was obviously already alluding to it. Personally, I really fucking like this game. Like, flaws and all, I really fucking enjoyed my time with this game. Like, more so than I thought I would once I started it. Not that I thought that I mean, it's very well documented on the show. I went into this game with, expectations in check, but as much as I love the new direction of Resident Evil, specifically with the first person view and whatnot, perspective that they take, I did have, high hopes for this game. And I was, naturally very hyped for it. But I also, once I started playing it, I knew this was going to be a different experience. This wasn't going to be a carbon copy of Resident Evil 7, and not for, let's change for change's sake, anything like that. But I really ended up really liking my experience at the end of the day. Like I've kind of said on the show before, traditionally my biggest gripe with Resident Evil, specifically, we're talking the modern entries, or modern mainline entries, I should say, like, I don't even say like reboot, but 7 on, so, 7, and then also to the remakes as well. The majority of the games are really spectacular overall, but then they end up kind of facing pacing issues at one specific moment, or in the second half of the game, and, or even like, we're talking early third act, which ends up leading to kind of a rushed end. And really additionally too, like, they just let the endings of these games, or not even that, just really narratively goes off the track by the end because of how rushed it is and whatnot. And while personally, I think there's one section that ends up being a little long in the tooth, but not like overwhelmingly long, but it was enough to kind of notice, okay, this section's clearly going on much longer than the other ones, noticeably, but not in the sense that I was like, God damn it, like, how the hell is this not over, yada yada, type of thing. But noticeably that I'm like, they could have shaved off a little bit of this. But overall, I think really Village tackles its pacing really much better than the second half of RE7. Like I said, a game in which I'm on record saying is like one of my favorite horror games of all time. I think it is 3/4 of a perfect horror game. And I think this handles the pacing of its story much well. And even on top of that, not only does it not take itself too seriously, it leans into the craziness of the plot, much like RE4 did. And, I think that's natural to keep making the comparisons to RE4 with this game because it very much wants to be RE4.
And it doesn't hide it in some of the parts.
No,
either.
and that's why I think that's why it's good in that sense, because RE4 is very much a different Resident Evil title comparative to, 1, 2, 3, those style of fixed camera, isometric almost to a degree in terms of like the way the camera can be set up at times, but very fixed camera, limited movement, yada yada. RE4 was very much more action oriented than like survival horror in a sense. It was much more action horror, and I think this game leans much more into action horror, which is good because I think that bodes well to the criticisms I had with the way RE7 wrapped up. Where this game, that's why I say this game doesn't take itself too serious. It's wacky. It gets out there. It fucking leans into it. I get the vibes that we see with, what's the game that was on the tip of my tongue? This happens to me all the time. Evil Within. Where I do get those feelings of Shinji Mikami, like the original creator of Resident Evil, and specifically Resident Evil 4. Like, I get the vibes from this style of game, where, yes, you do get wacky Resident Evil shit, that it starts out one way and it ends up completely in a different way. I don't want to spoil things too much, but like, it makes sense in this game so much more because it never tries to hide it behind the lens of, hey, we're going into this haunted mansion, or hey, we're going to the Baker estate and something's up, like something is slasher horror film. It doesn't do that, and that's a good thing, because if they're going in the direction the way that RE7 ended, which they obviously were, like, this makes much more sense to tackle it this way. Not to say that there wasn't any scary moments, but it's much more action horror than survival horror, and I think the way that they set that up really bodes well. Like, there's limited, it aesthetically pulls on RE4's heartstrings, with obviously the castle and the European, that European, what do I want to say? Even like almost like Gothic, European Gothic, like aesthetic with the castles and things like that. Like, it pulls on that obviously, but it just still was much more action oriented than anything in RE7. And sure, that limits, the jump scare moments. There still are a few. It's still creepy. It's still like, there's still elements that I'm like, that's fucking weird. That sent a shiver down my spine, but it limited those like horror movie jump scare aspects that you saw in, RE1 and obviously RE7. But it really makes up in that regard to the gameplay. And I think the gameplay is completely much smoother. I think the gameplay, for being a first-person I don't want to say shooter, because it's not a shooter, but having the action elements of this game bodes so much better to a first-person perspective in this game compared to RE7, where, like the inventory system. They completely remapped the inventory system. It feels much more like RE4. It's not necessarily, you're not worried about dumping things off into a safe room, into the chests in there, or the storage boxes. Like, there's nothing like that. Like, it's all, you can carry more, you can upgrade it. This is all stuff too that's been talked about in showcases and things like that. So that's not necessarily spoiler filled or anything, but and at the same time too, like, some of the gameplay elements with that, like, bode well towards that. Like, with that being said, I didn't feel like at the same time though, like, I'm saying this and now thinking out loud, like, I don't see it was a detriment to the game, but like, it played into that action part well. But also too, as somebody who is playing a horror game, like, you do want to kind of feel helpless at some points, because that is like an element that is one of the like things you kind of sign up for wanting to play a horror game. Like, you're wanting to kind of be in that vulnerable position. But with that being said, like, ammo felt abundant. Like, I never truly felt in danger. Like, I never felt that helplessness. I never really kind of had that. And not that I'm saying that's a bad thing for this style of game, but being still marketed as this survival horror game, even though it really kind of wasn't, in the way I look at it, I really enjoyed my time. Like, in RE7, I always was managing ammo. Like, I always was trying to say, okay, I have 2-3 shotgun shells and 6 pistol rounds, and I know that Jack's coming through here, and I'm also going to run into 2, mold creatures, in this room. How am I going to, like, manage my ammo? I never really had to worry about that stuff. Like, the lichens and things like that, like, I had enough ammo to compensate taking them down. And that's where I say, like, okay, that doesn't necessarily, like, that's not that big of a deal, when it comes to this style of game. But at the same time, like, I didn't feel in danger. Like, I think I maybe died 5 times total. Like, and I didn't die until 3/4 of the way through the game. Now, playing on standard difficulty, it's not as hard, but like, at the same time too, RE7, like, just replaying that recently and playing on, normal or whatever, because I wanted to play through it with my fiance before we played this, and I played it on, I usually play it on hard when I play it on PC, but playing it with controller to me is a little more cumbersome, because I'd rather play on PC, but in a first person perspective. But to me, that game, like, it just felt so much more difficult when I'm playing it. Obviously, because of the ammo management. Like I said, I always felt like I had barely any ammo. I was always scrounging, find ways to be able to craft different ammo and things like that, because there was never really ammo I felt lying around. So this game, I think, bodes well to bringing in new players, but at the same time, it is a continuation of, RE7. So who knows? So, we'll get into this, just kind of wrapping up. We'll get more into this when, we get into the spoiler cast and whatnot for the game. But the one thing I will give this, and a lot of people have kind of bagged on the plot, being like, oh, it's typical Resident Evil. It's, it's kind of wacky. It's this and that. Like, you're not going into it for that and yada yada. And I agree. But like I said, it bodes so well, I think, because it leans into its ridiculousness, not trying to say, like, oh, we're going this more believable, like, not gritty, but like more realistic approach. Well, it kind of throws that all out. And I applaud it for that, because it leans into that. And that's when, to me, Resident Evil shines the most. When it just, like, it leans so heavily into its plot to not make it seem like one thing after it's been one thing the whole time. Like, no, this is this world, and this is what we're dealing with. Like, forget everything, just take it for what it is. I think that's when that's when Resident Evil shines the most, and that's where I got the most out of it. But like I said, we'll get into more of this into the spoiler cast, but I really thought the connections, though, that I did see to other entries in the franchise were cool, and they weren't shoved down your throat. It's not to the extent of, a Dark Souls or something like that, where literally, if you want lore for this game or you want the story, you have to read item descriptions and things like. It's not to that extent by any means. It's a linear game. You're going to get a story given to you, but the connections to other games and the things that you find out playing this game, it's so well done through the environmental storytelling. Like that is
Yeah.
the most excellent thing I think in this whole game is the environmental storytelling. Because if you want to find those connections, you can find them, and they're really cool. And there's one part of the game where I actually like audibly was like, "Fuck yes!" Like whenever I got to one certain part in the game. And you'll know it when you get to it because you're like, cool. You're like, you could tell that they're setting up to get to this point and have you do this one thing. And once you do, you're like, oh, fuck, this is so cool. Like, and then it kind of starts, you get to do this one thing and start connecting all of these things if you want. And it's really cool. Like, I've heard some, longtime Resident Evil fans say, like, I didn't need to have that. I didn't want that. Like, to me, I did because it wasn't intrusive. It wasn't, it just didn't. There's some things that try to, like, especially to, like, someone who's a long-term Star Wars fan, seeing how they tried to tie everything, the new, instead of going one direction, just letting the new trilogy try to be its own, which I still like the new trilogy personally a lot. I know some long-term Star Wars fans will, probably come at me with, pitchforks and fucking torches and shit like that. But they did, it is obvious that they tried to shoehorn so many things in to make it fit in within the larger scale of the Skywalker saga. And to me, they didn't do it in that approach when it comes to Resident Evil and past entries and, just connecting it all into their, I just thought they did a really good job in that. And so that's kind of my, like, rambling of thoughts on just kind of going down the notes that I took on the game for things that I liked, disliked, yada, yada. Overall, like, I really, really, really enjoyed this game for what it was. I think it's a great continuation of...
Mm-hmm.
or evolution of what Resident Evil is. I thought 7 really helped establish that this franchise has the bandwidth to keep going, and it has the bandwidth to evolve, and it has the bandwidth to kind of, obviously too with the remakes, be able to, have multiple different, styles of games, and within it, with the remakes and now the new mainline entries and whatnot. But I think this does a really good job at showing, like, hey, yes, we have the horror elements, and yeah, we leaned more into those the first time around whenever we played it almost, conservatively, saying, like, this is what modern horror fans like. Cool, we'll make a Resident Evil game like that. And people did like that. They thought it was fresh. They thought it was good. Now it's clear that Capcom, I think, felt they had the confidence to go out and say, no, now let's make a Resident Evil game. And we'll take those elements, but let's make a Resident Evil game first and foremost. And I think that's what I felt the most out of this, that this is wacky Resident Evil again. And in a good way, where that's how I felt playing Resident Evil 4, where this is wacky, but they're committing to it. And I love that. They double down on it. And that's what, when people get way out there with creative outlets like that and, different properties and things like that, like, I find the most enjoyment on when they double down on it and just commit to saying, yes, we're not trying to do this thing and mask it behind this. No, this is what it is. Take it or leave it. Like, we're committing to this. And that's where I think, this game shines the most. So I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great continuation. I'm excited for the future of Resident Evil. I understand some of the gripes that people have. I have some gripes, minor overall, but, the game flew by, and that to me is a testament that whenever I rolled credits, I was like, all right, I'm booting it back up. Like, that to me is a sign of a good Resident Evil game, because Resident Evil games are replayable, and I want to replay this game, and I'm planning on replaying it. So, Mike, what did you think about the game?
Yeah, overall, I have a lot of similar sentiments to you, but also I do feel like my experience was a little bit different. So I'm not going to be the type of person or pretend like I'm going to gatekeep based on difficulty. I'm not that type of person. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of people taking in their art however they see fit. And if you're someone who wants to play through on an easier difficulty, that's fine. That's your decision. And I'm not going to shame you for it. And I'm not saying this to, like, try to, give you a backhanded compliment. I'm just saying in general, if I am being completely honest with you, I'm a person who likes to generally have challenging experiences when I play video games, and this is no exception. So I definitely enjoy the challenge for a lot of different reasons. But whenever we're talking about this game in particular, Resident Evil Village, I see a game that if you are someone who is trying to get into it for the lore, trying to get into it because you enjoy the story that Resident Evil brings, if those are your objectives, I would strongly recommend you playing through for the first time on an easier difficulty than hardcore. So I chose to play through hardcore the first time through, partly because I was being macho on stream, partly because whenever I played Resident Evil 7, I thought the normal difficulty was far too easy. In fact, I even thought hardcore on Resident Evil 7 was a little bit too easy for me. I would have preferred to play right through on Madhouse right off the rip. But this game is a little bit different. Again, the reason why I would strongly recommend you playing through on the original difficulty, or the normal difficulty, if you will, or even casual, if you're really trying to enjoy the story and everything, this game does bring some of those elements to light. It does tell a pretty strong story. It does a pretty good job with that. But to me, I'm someone who I wanted to play through on hardcore, but I found myself somewhat regretting it. So without spoiling too much of the game, I felt like for the first quarter or so of the game, I was really rushed. And reason being is I felt a little starved. So as Travis said, he felt the exact opposite. He felt flush with supplies, particularly when it came to ammo. I felt the exact opposite on hardcore. I felt very starved for first and foremost, chem fluids was the thing that I found the most difficult to find at the beginning of the game, and also ammo. So the enemies in hardcore compared to the easier difficulties that I've seen on stream, it does seem like the hardcore enemies really do sponge up some bullets a lot more than the other difficulties. So this is all a long-winded way of saying, like, I kind of regret playing through on hardcore the first time because, especially, again, I don't want to spoil too much because I want everyone to have their own experience, but when you're in the castle in particular, I felt very rushed, and I missed looting some areas because they brought back the map from the new remake of 2, where it's blue if you've searched everything, or red if there's still something to find. I found myself leaving a lot of areas red, but that's because I was constantly being like bothered and molested in the castle part of the game, where it's like I was so starved for items and ammo as it was, I couldn't afford to try to do certain things there to experience it fully. So that's my one kind of gripe with the game, is just the hardcore difficulty. They made it harder to find items, which, like, fine. Like, that's usually one of the things about Resident Evil games. That's one of the ways they up the difficulty on you, is they generally just make it harder to find everything. Like Madhouse difficulty on Resi 7, it was, items are few and far between, but they also decided to make the enemies a lot spongier, which and they do more damage. So it's like a triple whammy type situation.
Like, I do think it balances out overall pretty well. Like, yeah, in my opinion, like, because obviously, like you're saying, like, okay, if you're gonna have some beefier enemies on the reg and you're gonna have these, spongier enemies, the game has to be able to be balanced out properly, where, yeah, you're gonna have, a little more ammo to take care of them. But maybe, like I said, maybe it was just the difficulty I was playing on, that I was used to. RE7's more, like, I think RE7's a more difficult game in general. But maybe, like I said, it was just the difficulty I was playing on and the nature of the game, that it just seemed like the game was, or I was easily finding ammo. Like, there was one moment where I didn't have any ammo whatsoever. And I actually had to be like, okay, I have to scavenge. I have to go and use resources a little more mindfully, comparative.
Yeah.
Like, in Resident Evil 7, that was all the time that I was finding myself in those situations. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to bounce off that, because you're totally correct.
You're good. And I feel like in hardcore, like when you play through on hardcore or even harder, you are going to experience that much more than what you experienced on casual. Because you can go, like, my streams are behind paywall for rebroadcast for a lot of reasons. One being I might be a bad boy and like to stream music, and it's a little bit harder for them to DMCA you whenever whenever you have your videos behind a paywall. But by and large, in order for you to truly get through hardcore, and I'm still getting through it with pretty easy. I mean, all things considered, I'm getting through it pretty reasonably easily. I think the beginning of the game, it's a little bit difficult to get going, and it's super confusing because I feel like they do a poor job at kind of like leading you to what you need to do. But overall with hardcore, I feel like in harder difficulties, you are going to experience that more of what you got out of Resident Evil 7 with just constantly, like I find myself constantly having to decide, what am I going to use in this situation? Do I use this? Do I use that? What ammo do I need for this? What ammo do I need for that? Constantly trying to conserve. And again, it's not quite to the extreme that Resident Evil 7, especially with Madhouse difficulty was, but it is a lot like that. But moving on strictly from like just those little nitty-gritty things, something that I will say about Resident Evil 8 that is just a glowing review and recommendation for the game is I don't think that a Resident Evil game has got the gunplay any better than this game in particular, because
I agree.
I feel like it is snappy. It can be snappy if you want it to be. It can be smooth if you want it to be. They did a really good job with one of the weapons balancing it by making it really slow to aim in. Now you can circumvent it, but with a couple of different methods. But by and large, they kind of nerf the damage output, because I find myself now in a harder difficulty, as long as I have ammo for that particular weapon. And again, without spoiling it, I can kind of down the Lycans really easily, and I can down the other enemies with relative ease as long as I have ammo for it. So that's something that I finally, like, I constantly find myself crafting ammo for that gun and not the others. But by and large, like, I feel like the gunplay is just spectacular. And I don't know if it's because they were coming out with the multiplayer version of the game and they needed the gunplay to be on point, but this is the best it's ever been. Because even with Resi 7, I felt like I had to utilize the 180 a lot more than I had to in this game. Like, it is still there. If that's something that you like about Resident Evil games, is hitting a button and spinning around 180 degrees, you can still do that. But I find myself utilizing that almost never, because it just seems to just be, you know, more functional as far as looking around. Resi 7, I was constantly pressing, I think it's the Q button on a keyboard, to spin myself around 180 to try to run away or do things. But by and large, those two, like, I genuinely thought the gunplay was spectacular. The story, I can get how some people could kind of hammer on it, and I actually have a little bit of like not a negative overall, but I do have an interesting point that I don't feel like anyone has ever really made about the game in particular. I felt like the game is beautiful. I felt like they did a spectacular job with the environment. I felt like I constantly find myself on stream, like I have my cans on or my headphones, and the ambient noises create this immersion that is so good that I can constantly kind of find myself removing my headphones to try to see, like, is someone doing something outside of my headphones that I can't hear? Is someone in my house? Is someone banging on my window? Like, things like that, like, they did such a good job at. And I do generally believe that the game was so beautiful. Travis kind of, you know, hit the nail on the head with explaining, you know, the castles and the Eastern European mountainous feel. All of that's on point. The Gothic architecture kind of feels like maybe the Czech Republic. You know, they're pretty popular.
I
with
will
that.
say, to you saying that, I didn't really touch on it too much, but I played on console, and you're playing on PC, which I fully plan on, like, completely buying this game again, double dipping and playing this game on PC, because I'd like to play it in 1440p with super high frames. But playing it on console and playing it on next gen hardware, playing it at 4K, it's 4K 60, like native 4K 60. This game is hands down probably the best looking third party AAA game that I've seen running on a console. Period. Like, in terms of performance, in terms of the quality that is had with that performance, it is absolutely, bar none, I think, the best we've seen from a third party standpoint. Not talking, you know, a first party Xbox title, first party Sony title, whatever you want to, like, these developers who have firsthand, like, they're not designing a game for multiple, you know, across a full array of different hardware, where that you will see some corners cut to make sure, hey, this fits for everybody. But this is hands down absolutely one of the most gorgeous games I've ever seen, specifically across a multitude of hardware on console at 4K 60. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was genuinely, impressed, and I felt like they did a spectacular job with a lot of things. But I will say, I'm kind of critical of the graphics, and here's why. I felt like it's beautiful. It does a fantastic job setting the scene. They do a great job immersing you. But I will say, I feel like at some points they may it's the nature of the beast. I like to stop and smell the roses in general, but I feel like sometimes they rush you through gameplay or points in the game with enemies to try to get you to just like get past an area that might have been not as good looking as another. And I will say with PC, it does feel kind of capped out. Like I feel like the beauty is there, but it's like a surface beauty. Like once you look under the cover at a certain point, it kind of hits this, growth, like decay, like exponential decay, where like it's super beautiful, but then it all of a sudden falls off a cliff and it's just like meh. But like,
I'll be honest,
like that's just nitpicking.
Oh no,
that's not
100%.
That's not being like. I'm just being like a little bit of like a snob when it comes to that. Just giving my honest thoughts.
I'll be honest. The one thing though, I think there was a heavy emphasis for this game on console compared to other Resident Evils in the past. And if you, I'll recommend the Digital Foundry video that they did on the deep dive they did on the PC version of this game, kind of alluding towards that. You'll see there were some compromises made for PC. But because I think this game, specifically on the Sony side, because they held the marketing rights for this, I think this game was definitely designed to be a next-gen showcase piece, where it still runs great on, the PS4, the Xbox One, and obviously it runs well on PC, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of elements of this game were designed to be that, hey, this is one of those games that one of the first third-party titles that truly feels like a next-gen experience. And I think they were really wanting to market it around that and even design some elements around that, or at least design around the hardware of console. Because usually it's almost the opposite of, if it's a third-party title, PC is getting, the bulk of the attention, and then the console versions will be designed, obviously to fit that. But the PC version is usually the version that is the, not master version, but the crown jewel where you'll get the most bells and whistles out of it. Where it was kind of flip-flop this time around, at least from a third-party standpoint.
Yeah, it did seem that way, and this isn't like, I just can't give you like I can't give this game like a 100% like suck off, like I can't just 100% suck it off. So I had to give a little bit of critique to it. Some of the enemies, like I said, the beginning of the game in particular was very frustrating, but overall, I will say, as far as calling back to older Resident Evil games, I felt like it did a really good job. I felt like I loved Resident Evil 7 for a lot of reasons, and the part that I didn't like was because it felt like they got away from what they were like. It just felt like such a 180 in the middle of the game. And Resident Evil 8 didn't make that mistake. Like if you're gonna go wacky with the boat part of Resident Evil 7, just fucking own it. Like you were saying, like they just own it. It is what it is. But with Resident Evil 7, they gave me this weird tease where it's like, dude, the scariness or the scare factor of Resident Evil 7 was like a fucking 15. Like if you were playing Roller Coaster Tycoon and someone's like, I only like a 5 intensity, and you have a roller coaster that's like a 9 and they get on it, they're like a little baby back bitch about it. That's kind of like what this game felt like. It felt like they meant to like appease more of like the 4 intensity with the scare factor, which is fine because they did such a good job with the action portions of the game. It was really great. But there is some scary parts of the game. There's jump scares, which I feel like jump scares can be kind of cheap, and I feel like they did dig into that with Resident Evil 7. I'm the type of person, I think jump scares are a little cheap. I feel like if you
we also did play through that game at least once on VR, and that also plays into it. Maybe that's why it's so ingrained in my mind as well.
it's very terrifying on VR, but I feel like in Resident Evil 8 they did some jump scaring, but not as much.
It wasn't as heavy-handed.
Yeah, and I agree with that sentiment, but overall, with how many Harkins it makes back to Resident Evil 4, which some people like, basically all the fandom seems to love Resident Evil 4 because it is different, but it's also very good at the same time. And Resident Evil 8 has a lot of similarities to that game, which I'm a huge fan of and I love. And with Resident Evil 8, I find myself like you, I am ready to run credits on this game. Last night I streamed it until about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard, which was like 2 hours or 3 hours later than I wanted to. It's just a game that I just want to continue getting through. And I find myself playing through on the hardest difficulty also. And again, this seems like a game like Resident Evil 2 that I might even dabble in the speed running a little bit. I might not get too technical or too serious about it, like some of the speedrunning community, but I genuinely do see myself giving this a little bit of a run, speedrunning it just because I do enjoy seeing how fast I can beat games, because I do genuinely like this game. I think all things considered, on a scale of 10, I would probably give it, I personally would give it like an 8.75. I would consider it a 9. But again, I see certain things about this game that are kind of brushed under the mat by other people who would review this game. I see these little intricacies, especially like the aiming in the battle. Like, goddamn, you couldn't have done that any better. And for someone who focuses on gunplay so much personally, like that's one of the reasons why I'm giving it such a high rating. Like that's almost a 2-point boost to me in itself. Yeah, it's just like how good the gunplay is on it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if I had to, and just kind of piggybacking off you said, like it is a game that I very much was like I want to keep going. I want the next story beat. I want like anytime that like we'd get on a roll and Molly'd be like, I think I'm gonna go to bed. I'm like,
you're like, God damn it.
I'm like, yeah, that's fine. God damn it. I want to keep playing this game. But now that we roll credits on, I'm excited to go back and like kind of binge a playthrough of it too. But yeah, if I had to put like a number on it, which I know we usually don't, but I would be right around there too. I would at least say an 8. 8 probably. I'm more probably 8.5. I'd even maybe stretch it to a 9. Like if I would easily hear an argument for a 9, and I'd probably on most days be like, okay, yeah, like somewhere between there, between an 8,
yeah,
between an 8.5 and 8.7, something like that. Like I think this game will easily, as of right now, this game is easily in my top 5 games, even top 3. Do I see certain games coming out that could dethrone it? Yeah, probably, potentially. We're only in May, but at the same time, too, who the fuck knows with COVID and whatnot? What the rest of the year looks like with dates being moved all the time and whatnot. I definitely still think this game has the potential to easily be in my top 5 games at the end of the year. Like, I enjoyed it that much, and I'm going to enjoy it again, and I'm going to play it on PC. I'm going to, Resident Evil games tend to stick with me, and this one's no different.
I guess we probably should have disclaimered our conversation with like the fact that we are both pretty big Resident Evil fanboys. I would say you're probably more so than me personally, but I feel like I really loved Resident Evil 7 and I really liked the remake of 2. So I'm a little bit of like a huge fanboy. So you might be getting a little bit of a little bias from me personally. And most of the time I try to give you an unbiased opinion. But with a game like this, I feel like sometimes the bias will creep in because I genuinely enjoy the game. And I could see how someone could give this. It's one of those games that I feel like if you come onto the show or leave us a comment and say you guys are morons, I gave it a 6. I literally could be like, okay, I get it. I see that. Like I'm not dumb. I don't pretend like this is a perfect game, but I love it. And that doesn't mean that you're going to love it. And that's okay too. You might hate it. And hey, that's okay. And I could get it. But at the end of the day, I feel like both of us, we really genuinely enjoy Resident Evil. And we are giving you we're trying to give you as fair of a review as we can, but we're both fans of it.
No, exactly. And I think that's been pretty evident for those who have listened to the show like more than once. I think anytime we talk about Resident Evil, we kind of throw that disclaimer on or make it pretty evident that we're pretty big fans of it. But yeah, Resident Evil 8, I definitely recommend people go out and play it. Definitely
go play it, please.
Go play it on your Xbox Series X if you were lucky enough to get one, or Series S. It runs very well on that from what I've heard. Play it on PC. Play it wherever you can. Play it on PS5. I don't fucking care. Go play it wherever you can. Yeah, I definitely recommend it, and definitely think it's one of the first big, AAA third-party titles to come out this year that I think is going to be a conversation game for, one of the games that we're talking about later into this year. I don't think it's going to be, an Outriders or, even a hit. Well, I'll give credit to Hitman. It's still having some conversations around it, but I think it's going to last a little bit longer than that in terms of conversations around this game moving forward. Because a lot of people are playing this game. This game is hit with a lot of people overall. So, but yeah, and I'm excited to go into it deeper whenever we have some spoiler talk potentially next week about that. We can talk about certain beats and decisions and things like that. So yeah, Resident Evil 8, man. Anyways, let's move on into our 2 news stories for the week, and we'll kind of make them quick since we went on a little long with Resident Evil, even though I wanted to take as much time to talk about Resident Evil as possible. But let's talk about our 2 news big topics for the week that I wanted to cover. First off, though, we're talking Gears of War. And it might not just be Gears of War for the Coalition in this new little tidbit that we have, this report that comes out. So, Gears of War series moving to Unreal Engine 5 for, quote, multiple new projects. This comes from Joe Screbbles over on IGN. We also have a follow-up article too, but we'll get to that as well. Gears of War series is getting, quote, multiple new projects, all of which will be developed on the upcoming Unreal Engine 5. In a blog post, developer of the Coalition announced that it has started, quote, shifting our resources to next-gen development using Unreal Engine 5. It also confirmed this isn't just for Gears 6, saying it will be, developing on UE5 for multiple new projects in the coming years. However, don't expect an announcement for a new Gears game anytime soon. The developer makes that clear, quote, shifting to a new engine is a big undertaking, so we want to be clear that we will not be announcing any new projects or titles for some time. Unreal Engine 5 was announced last year with a spectacular PS5 tech demo, which aims to help create games that would be deemed impossible to make with current technology, but help increase efficiency for developers. It was impressive enough that Sony invested $250 million in creator Epic Games, with Epic CEO Tim Sweeney saying, quote, I guess they liked it. As for its current projects, the Coalition made clear that Gears 5 updates, Operation 7 and Operation 8, will be coming during the course of 2021. Quote, each operation will have 2 drops, including new characters, new maps, and special events, reads the post. Quote, through the end of the year, we will have store updates with exciting new content, as well as featured playlists. And then also, though, a follow-up to that article in a way, with some rumors that were going around that kind of maybe linked to this. No, Gears of War devs aren't working on a Star Wars game, supposedly. This comes from Liam Wiseman over on IGN. As always, both the links for this article, or these 2 articles, will be in the description. After Gears of War developer, the Coalition confirmed that it was working on, quote, multiple new projects, rumors sprung up saying that the team was working on a Star Wars game. Sadly, that is not the case. In a Reddit post by senior community manager Sean Ackerman, he confirmed that the team at the Coalition are not working on a Star Wars game, stating, quote, just to clarify regarding the Star Wars thing, we are not working on any such title. We have nothing else to announce at this time. The original rumor popped up earlier this month with GamesBeat's Jeff Grubb summarizing, quote, now I've heard rumors that there could be a Star Wars thing from out of the Coalition, but I haven't been able to confirm that, and these rumors are kicked around in a few different places. Basically, I'm not putting any money on that. End quote. So, obviously, I think it's pretty natural to expect that a lot of titles that are in production, especially pre-production, and studios who traditionally work within the Unreal toolset would be transitioning to Unreal 5 for their new projects. Hell, there may, not really be another active franchise or IP out there that is more lineage than Gears of War to the Unreal engine, really, in terms of ones that have been going for quite a while and who continue to, dabble in Unreal, given that Gears of War at one time was an Epic property. So what obviously is the big headline grab out of this is that there are multiple projects in the works with Unreal Engine 5 and at the Coalition, and that's outside of Gear 6. Like, that includes Gear 6, but we're talking multiple projects. So take Gear 6 out of it, obviously that's using Unreal Engine 5, I would imagine. It's in development, yada, yada. But we're talking multiple projects. So it's obviously interesting given that the Coalition, is akin to that of a 343 Industries being pretty much established to oversee a singular IP. But even though the Star Wars rumor was kind of put to bed, and I say that a little sarcastically because, of course, even if there was something in there, Sean Ackerman, the senior community manager over at the Coalition, or any studio, for example, if there is a big reveal like that coming, they want to own that. Of course they're going to say, no, the rumor's false, that yada yada. Of course they're going to, because they want to own the message when they put it out. They don't want anybody else to reveal the message or give the reveal or the announcement for them. They control that message. Of course they're going to say that. Whether it's true, false, whatever, they're going to say the same damn thing until they're ready to talk about it. So whether it's true or not, who knows? But they're going to say that same thing. Anyways, though, Mike, do you see these projects, including licensed projects or properties like, Star Wars or Marvel or something like that, for example? Or do you think these projects are just going to stay in the realm of Gears, or at least within, even just Microsoft properties to begin with? Will we see more projects like Gears Tactics or the Gears Pop game or something like that? Do you feel those, these upcoming projects align more with that? Or do you think we could, potentially see fire from the smoke that we're seeing with a Star Wars, IP or something like that?
Yeah, I don't see why you would limit the Coalition, because, Gears 5 did sell pretty well. I feel like it was relatively popular, but I do feel like compared to past Gears games, I feel like that's a series that has lost some of the steam, much like Halo, where before it was kind of like a quintessential game for Xbox. Like, it's one of the reasons why people would buy Xbox. But I do feel like, honestly, it kind of has lost a little bit of steam when it comes to popularity. So I don't see why they wouldn't be given the opportunity to make a different game. I feel like Gears 5 still a very solid game, technically speaking, with the gameplay and everything. I feel like it was a really well put together game. Didn't seem to have too many bugs that I had seen. But, all things considered, like I said, I feel like it's a game that has lost some of the popularity and the mystique to it. And unlike Halo, it just feels like it's in a situation where they might not be as dedicated to like reviving it as they would be Halo, unfortunately, for Gears. And this is just me kind of just spitballing ideas. So I don't see why they wouldn't give them a whack at making a game, especially if they kind of, you let them off the hook a little bit and let them kind of sink their teeth into something a little different. And hell, them working on a Star Wars game might kind of revitalize them and make them come back stronger for another Gears. Because Gears of Wars isn't over. It's not dead.
Oh my God, no. I mean, Gears 5 was probably the most well-received Gears game since 2, I would say.
Yeah.
And really, I think this was the first time we saw the Coalition almost have that moment that I think, fans of Halo who have been hoping for out of 343. Like, they had that moment of, okay, granted, there were obviously, original members from the Gears team that did move into, the Coalition and help establish that, just like Bungie into 343. But they finally had that moment of, yes, we're not Epic, but you know what? We're the Coalition, and we were able to finally get a Gears game that kind of captured both the feeling of the old Gears of War franchise, but also make our own type of thing and kind of meet in the middle with what fans wanted, an evolution of the original while also still feeling, having that original feel as well. That they kind of had that with Gears 5. So like, people are on a high with Gears right now, and obviously we're seeing more come out with Gears Tactics and, more licensing with the Gears IP in general. That, yeah, you're right. Gears isn't going anywhere. Gears 6 is fucking rolling. I mean, in Gears 5, which I thoroughly enjoyed, it left on a cliffhanger, and it left on a cliffhanger that you decided, it was kind of pick your poison. Like, I'm curious to really see where it goes. So like, you're completely right. Gears is not dead.
Yeah, I'm not saying like I'm not willing to give up on Gears yet. They're not willing to give up on Gears yet, and maybe letting them get the taste of something a little different in their mouth might be good. I think that's something that 343 could even benefit from, to be honest. Now, they're in year 18 of their life cycle of trying to develop this game, so let's not do anything too crazy.
Right.
But I feel like if they kind of maybe spread their wings a little bit and got out of their comfort zone, like a new Halo Wars or something, maybe it could kind of revitalize, their efforts, if you will. Not that their efforts have been poor or anything, but I just feel like maybe it'll kind of revitalize them as a team.
Mm-hmm. No, and definitely, and to be honest, that's what, that's the issues that I kind of have with the approach to this, like having these singular studios working on one singular franchise. And I've always kind of had a little bit of an issue with that I felt like there could potentially be a higher probability of burnout and turnover, and where you're kind of stuck into one thing a little bit. And that was always kind of my issue that I had with 343 and even the Coalition to a degree. But even though you could say, okay, Bungie, well, they only worked on Halo and whatnot, but they also, now you're seeing, they wanted to try something different, so they left and, they got bought out and went and tried something different. But I always kind of worried about that a little bit with these studios, and I think now we're seeing such a different Microsoft from when these studios were established, a much more loose Microsoft, a much more adventurous Microsoft, into willing to try new things and try different aspects and be proactive with trends and whatnot. That I could have sworn that if it wasn't Perfect Dark that the initiative was doing, it was going to be a Marvel Games project. I thought it was going to be the Spider-Man equivalent that we saw with them. So could we see that? I know that the Star Wars IP is now becoming, it's almost being treated in a similar fashion to how Marvel Games is doing, with which I wanted personally as a Star Wars fan, as a Marvel fan, like, of these IP, that's how I wanted. I didn't want the EA exclusivity that we've seen with Star Wars for how long. Even though we did get Jedi Fallen Order out of that, which is great, but I wanted to see handpicking. Hey, X Studio does this really well. Let's work with them to see what they want to do, if they want to use our IP to do a project that we think would be well. Like finding those studios that click well with that IP and work well instead of being tied to one specific. So I personally think that there's, a small chance that it could be an outside, IP coming into Gears or into the Coalition. At the same time, though, I think it's probably a safer bet to think, hey, we're going to get a Gears Tactics follow-up, even though the Coalition only kind of, played more of a support role when developing that. Splash Damage kind of oversaw the heavy lifting with that. But, it may be one of those things that goes in-house now with the Coalition, that we see a follow-up to Gears Tactics. We see, it could be some kind of, live service aspect of Gears that's coming there. It could be more side stories. It could just be smaller experiences. Who knows? It could be mobile projects, even though it's running on Unreal. They're talking specifically Unreal 5, so it's less likely that's obviously going to happen, but they could have those things. But at the same time too, I think this vision of studios being, hey, you're one specific, that you only do this franchise, that's kind of archaic. And I think that was a mistake from the get-go. Me personally, I think that was a mistake from the get-go that Microsoft kind of did with their two biggest IP, obviously to make sure they solidified those for the future. And I understand that and I get that. But you look at Sony, yeah, when you think Naughty Dog, you think The Last of Us. You also think Uncharted. And you also think Jak and Daxter. When you hear Insomniac, yeah, you think of Spider-Man. You also think of Ratchet and Clank. You also think of Sunset Overdrive. Like, there's more than they have a couple of franchises that they work through. And they're still developing new IP as well. That provides much more of a creative a creative environment that isn't just, hey, you got to stick within this parameter. You have to, you cannot, you got to color within, you can't, color outside the lines. You have to keep it within there. So, but now seeing how Microsoft is in a modern gaming landscape, I don't think it's that outlandish anymore to think that, hey, sure, they can work on a smaller project, a smaller Star Wars project, or, at least be in tandem and be maybe a support studio for that or something like that. Who knows? But I wouldn't be shocked if we see something like that at the same time. But my gut says that we're still probably, the focus is going to be on obviously more Gears properties, more ways to get Gears out there to people. But at the same time, I just think that idea of being constrained so much to one property is just archaic. And it's a little disappointing because I know how well the Coalition is with not only recruiting talent and not only seeing what this talent can do with this not only with this franchise, but just in general. You kind of look at, you go into LinkedIn and you look at some of the history that some of the developers and designers have, that come there, just like 2343, you see the amount of talent that is there that something can be done well. I just hate seeing talented people and creative minds be restricted. And I love Gears, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I was just praising how much I enjoyed Gears 5. And the evolution of that game in that series right now is really stellar, and I'm so excited for the future of that. But at the same time, though, I want more. I think it's not wrong to ask for more from that talent outside of just Gears. So we'll see. And, hopefully that'd be dope to see eventually, like, oh, cool, we're going to get a Star Wars game. It's one of those things like pie in the sky type of things. Like, man, if you could have one developer work with this property or this specific comic book character or yada yada, who would you want to see? And it's kind of gets to one of those that it's like, man, that'd be cool to see that. Like, even like a Bad Batch, like the Bad Batch right now within the Clone Wars and whatnot, like that's really hot in the street for Star Wars fans right now. Having the Coalition do something like that would be fucking fantastic. Any kind of third-person shooting aspect in Star Wars, even just like a remake of the original Battlefield or something like that, or Battlefront. I'm sorry, I always get Battlefield and Battlefront mixed up. But something like that would be just so dope. Like, because they do third-person cover-based shooting so well that you can implement that in a way into, the Star Wars universe pretty well. So, I don't know. It would be cool, though. Like I said, I just hate seeing talent be constrained at times like that. Because the Coalition does fucking fantastic work, and I just don't feel like they should be completely boxed in sometimes to just one specific IP. But who knows? Anyways, Mike, let's head into our last news article for this week. And we're talking, like I said, Ubisoft. I kind of want to bring it back to Ubisoft a little bit because Ubisoft says it's changing strategy to focus on more, quote, high-end free-to-play games. This comes from Tom Ivan over on Video Games Chronicle, as always, link in the description. Ubisoft provided an update on its game development strategy during its full-year earnings call on Tuesday when it said it intends to be less reliant on AAA releases as part of its overall product mix. Quote, in line with the evolution of our high-quality lineup that is increasingly diverse, we're moving on from our prior commitment regarding releasing 3 to 4 premium AAA games per year, said Ubisoft Chief Financial Officer Frederick Dugan. Quote, it is indeed no longer a proper indication of our value creation dynamic. For example, our expectation for Just Dance and Riders Republic are consistent with some of the industry's AAA performers. Additionally, we are building high-end free-to-play games to be trending towards AAA ambitions over the long term, he added. This is purely a financial communication evolution and doesn't change the fact that we continue to expect a high cadence of content delivery, including powerful premium and free-to-play new releases. Posting on Twitter, one of Ubisoft's senior analysts claimed that the company's comments were in reference to free-to-play becoming a larger share of the revenue pie, not an indication that there will be less traditional paid games like Assassin's Creed, end quote. They also wrote, the content mix is expanding, not changing. A good comparison is the evolution of Call of Duty since Warzone. I mostly wanted to steer the convo away from free-to-play. Free-to-play games are replacing AAA paid games to free-to-play is going to be an additional way to experience some of these IP. Last week, Ubisoft announced plans to expand the Division with a new free-to-play, with a new free-to-play game and mobile game. Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland is being led by Red Storm Entertainment, there you go, Mike, and is described as a standalone experience set for release on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. No details were revealed on the separate mobile game either, though. Duguid elaborated on the new direction, quote, we think that we have a great opportunity to meaningfully expand the audiences of our biggest franchises. We have taken the time to learn from what we did last year with Hyperscape. We are also learning, of course, with the launch we'll be making of Roller Champions, and we've been learning a lot with Brawlhalla, which is fast growing. And we think it is now time to come with high-quality free-to-play games across all of our biggest franchises across all platforms. But, of course, it will take some time before proving it in a more assertive way. That's why we want to be cautious in year one. If we are successful, then that we can have a very meaningful impact on the value ending on March 31st, 2022, will include the release of Far Cry 6 and Rainbow Six Quarantine by September 30th, plus Riders Republic, The Division Heartland, and Roller Champions. And it confirmed during its earnings call that it has no AAA games scheduled for the release during the second half of the fiscal year, which includes the Christmas season, which is interesting to think about. So while I don't necessarily think this shocks anybody, considering we've seen this trend really solidify over the past couple of years, given Fortnite's success in the free-to-play space and kind of showing, hey, you could have a really high-quality product put out at free-to-play and not only survive, but thrive under that. But this has really kind of been a slippery slope for large-scale AAA publishers like Ubisoft when it comes to free-to-play commitments. You know, it's really, to me, this is starting to become very reminiscent to the late 2000s, early 2010s, where DLC and season passes first really started to become very commonplace on console. And you really started to see more of that content become, gate kept behind an additional paywall, where you're paying $60 for a game, but to get really all the content, you need to pay $100 for the season pass. And it was much more egregious. And now we, started to see that kind of level out and start to see more value proposition out of games now, out of the $60 game that we see that, hey, you know what, you're going to get an out of the box experience, complete exactly how we imagine the game. And hey, if you want to support the game even more, we'll have some additional, expansions and things like that down the road. But you by no means need to have these to enjoy the full game. We saw that evolution. And I think we'll eventually see with this. But Mike, how much hesitation do you have really regarding the increased commitment long-term to the free-to-play models within the large AAA space? Even though, Ubisoft is saying, hey, it's an additional branch to their business model. Not, this isn't, we're just changing over to this, no more, standalone products, like Assassin's Creed or anything like that. It won't overtake, I guess, their traditional standalone experiences. But do you see that bleed over becoming inevitable, though, if, success is found with this new model into games like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry? What do you think about all this?
Yeah, they already screwed me over for $60 on Rainbow Six Siege. So, yeah, I mean, Ubisoft is kind of one of those developers that... and you kind of saying that, say what you want about Activision and Blizzard and whatnot. I've never had to pay for any of the new heroes in Overwatch. And I've been playing that game a long fucking time. I spent $60 on Rainbow Six Siege and didn't get any of the new operators. And other people could pay $60 later and get basically all the new operators. So, yeah, they're on my shit list. They make... Ubisoft's kind of synonymous with making really bad decisions, but they also make some really good decisions. So it is a legitimate concern because you can kind of get caught up in that rat race of trying to appease customers, but also if you're not getting money on the game for like entrance, it's like running another Roller Coaster Tycoon example. Like it's like opening a park in Roller Coaster Tycoon and not charging admission, but just gouging the shit out of people for every ride. You charge them all this money for every ride. And you charge them $1 to use the bathroom. Like, that's what this kind of has the opportunity to become. And I'm not like saying for sure that's what's going to happen, but it is like, I think you'd be a little foolish to not be concerned that that would be a reality. Is like, everything, yeah, sure, it's free to get the game, but like, oh, want to get past level 1, better pay money. Want to get past level 2, better pay me more money. Like, that kind of stuff comes to mind.
Yeah, and that's where I find it, like, that reminds me of so much of, like I said, the late 2000s, early 2010s, where we saw Activision really milk that with Call of Duty, where we saw it start to become very limited in what you can do with a $60 game in terms of, like, you as the player. When you get that $60 game, like, it just became more of a money grab, and completely understandable that games are expensive to develop. They're very hard to develop, but they're also very, very expensive to develop, and that cost is only going to keep going up and up and up as games become more expansive and more emphasis is put on games. So that's why we're starting to see the $69, $99 game, the $70 game start to replace the $60 game. And slowly that's probably going to become the norm. But at the same time, while I don't mind doing that. I understand why the free-to-play market is appeasing, and appealing for so many developers, where it's like, we can put this game out. It's a low-cost entry. You can get out there and play as much as you want for this game, but at the same time, though, like, if you want to support us, cool, you could buy skins, you could buy battle passes, you could do all this. And yeah, at a clip, it's sure, maybe a year you're only every couple months you're only paying $5 or $20, but maybe by the end of the year you're paying $100 for this game. And yeah, you may get a ton of hours out of it if it's your Fortnite or your Warzone that you're playing constantly. That's the only game you play or whatever. There are people like that, like Destiny. Like, that's all people will play. So, to them, though, yeah, they're going to spend $200 or whatever in there, and you're going to get more out of it. So free to play really becomes more like, pay to play. And, it's a slippery slope that we see with this because, yeah, it's going to be hard to really implement a lot of those free to play elements into Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, Splinter Cell, if we ever fucking see one again. But at the same time, we're already starting to see the emphasis put on, hey, look at all these paid options you can have within Assassin's Creed. Like, I love the newest iterations of Assassin's Creed games, but there are a lot of different things you could buy in that game that really I don't see any, like, yeah, some of the skins are cool and things like that, but like boosts and resource packs and things like that, like, which, hey, if you only have a limited amount of time to do things and you want to actually finish these games, like, yeah, maybe you need to buy those. But like, some of these things that come into question then that you look of, and it kind of leads into the free to play model. Like, at what point does this game become designed around that from the standpoint of it hurts its actual gameplay loop and it hurts its actual, how good the game could be and its design elements? Like, at one point it's like, okay, at some point it becomes, do we really want to actually commit to this because we're going to lose a player base long term over this and end up losing more money because, the game, we're becoming too money hungry with how we design these games. I don't think free-to-play games are bad by any stretch of the imagination because there are a lot of benefits to them. Like I said, more money into developers' pockets and being able to, at least at face value, take that $60, $70 price tag away. And we're seeing much more, polish and quality put into free-to-play games. Look at Fortnite, look at Warzone, But at the same time, too, I'm somebody who adores single player experiences as well. I adore narrative driven games. I adore open world RPGs. Like, I want to still have those, and I want to have them untainted. And I don't want to have to worry about, a free to play model coming to that and being, chapter, almost, it's like, it almost becomes Destiny like, where I love Destiny, don't get me wrong, but like, where we saw Activision kind of gatekeep things. And I don't want to have to worry about, even potentially like a lot of backlash Destiny seeing right now, content vaulting and things going away and huge sections of single player experiences being vaulted because the game gets too big and this and that. Like that's where the issues start to come in, where, if you have traditional, standalone experiences, yeah, they're coming out of the box, and yeah, you can get some DLC, but you don't have to worry about necessarily server supporting each of those every single time somebody puts a disc in. So I'm like you, I'm weary of it, but at the same time, hopefully we're seeing more and more stellar sales numbers come out of single player games that I think Ubisoft knows, hey, we can't shoot ourselves in the foot with this. We're still making a shit ton of money off of our games because we sell them on every platform, known to man. We move a ton of units within, the PS4 right now and the last generation in general, but specifically on Sony's side because there were 100 plus million PS4s, so we're still moving a ton on there. And we're only going to start selling more once the Series X and the PS5 come into play. So I don't think we're going to lose that, but it does make me a little hesitant because I'm already seeing some pay-to-win elements already in, Assassin's Creed and things like that, which are a little bit of a turnoff. So, Mike, I think that does it for our episode this week. Let's head into Party Chat before we wrap it up for good. If you're new to the show, Party Chat is where we propose one question at the end of each week of the show that we just want to discuss with you. Could be as simple as what's your favorite story be in the game, what have you been playing during quarantine, or could be a little more in depth as to why the negative stigma around gaming exists, for example. And after answering it ourselves, we'll kick it over to you to tweet your responses to us over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, or email them into us at bonusaccessory@gmail.com, and we'll read some of the responses the following week. Last week's question: with the rumor Resident Evil 4 remake coming within the next year or so, given the solidified success of the first-person perspective in Resident Evil, do you think we'll see a first-person mode implemented into the remake as an option? And from Vicious7659, I wouldn't be shocked if we do, but I feel it could bring more backlash than benefit from the dedicated Resident Evil fanbase. Interesting perspective. Mike, this week's question: what is a Bethesda franchise you were hoping to see thrive under Microsoft outside of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls? So we're talking anything from Arcane, Prey, Dishonored, could be machine games with Wolfenstein, could be, id with Doom or Rage, all these different franchises they have under there that aren't Fallout and Elder Scrolls. What franchise do you think, are you hoping to see kind of thrives under Microsoft?
Yeah, I am already a big fan of Doom, so I wouldn't really put too much weight into Doom, but I am really looking forward to Wolfenstein. I'm a big fan of that game. Not the newer games, but I was a huge fan of the older games, especially Enemy Territory, which was made by Splash Damage. So they made a little bit of a cameo in the show today. But I'm curious to see what they do with Wolfenstein, because honestly, like, I know it's probably not going to be multiplayer with it being Bethesda, but Enemy Territory was such an awesome game. And I'm really excited to see what they kind of do next and how they kind of draw in people who might not be, traditional or even, the biggest fans of Wolfenstein right now. I'm curious to see what they do with that.
I was going to say Wolfenstein was one of my other options, but with us talking about all this week with Resident Evil and whatnot, give us the Evil Within 3, man. Let's go. Evil Within 3. I actually have never finished Evil Within 2, even though I have it installed on my PC. I started playing it like 2 months ago, and I was like, I need to get back to this. I own it multiple times. I want to play it. I want to support that because I love that style. I love the first Evil Within. So I've heard the second one's even, it ends up being better than the first, which is usually tough to see. So I want another Evil Within. I keep supporting crazy, weird, fucking wacky horror. I think that's the theme of this episode in general now. It's just support wacky horror in video games. I want more of it. Keep giving me more. Anyways, Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on the interwebs, talk about everything we talked about, whether it was our Resident Evil Village review, whether it was Gears and the Coalition and what they could be doing next, or Ubisoft and free to play and how that's going to play out. Where can people find you on the interwebs to talk about all the nerdy stuff we talked about today?
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER. That's Toy Soldier, and the second O is an X. You can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Nice. And as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travlis, on most internet platforms, including at Travlis_ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travlis_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me, you can do so for on Xbox Live and most other platforms, so just regular old Travlis. That's TRAVLESS. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all of that jazz wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games alike, and our dope giveaways. With that being said, Mike, that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you everyone so much for listening, sharing, and being a part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.